What if I told you there's a bloodline so powerful, so far-reaching, that it once stretched across half the known world? And yet today, almost no one knows it ever existed. A dynasty that didn't just conquer land, but quietly rewired the very DNA of modern civilization. A family erased from textbooks, but not from history. If you believe history is more than kings and dates, if you want the untold truths, it's the hidden legacies, the stories that empires tried to bury, subscribe now. Because this is one of those stories to understand the mystery of the hidden bloodline. We must begin with the man who started it all, a man who rose from exile, betrayal, and starvation. To become one of the most powerful humans who ever lived, he was not. Born in a palace, there was no crown, no prophecy, no empire waiting for him. He was born into the harsh, unforgiving Mongolian steppe, sometime around 1162, into a tribal world ruled by warlords, shifting alliances, and endless blood feuds. His name was Temujin. When Temujin was just 9 years old, his father was poisoned. By a rival tribe, his family was abandoned by their clan, left to starve in the wilderness. He was hunted, captured, even enslaved. But through it all, Temujin never lost his will to survive. And more importantly, he never forgot the names of those who betrayed him as he grew older. Temujin didn't just fight to survive, he fought to unite. He knew that Mongol tribes had strength, but no unity. They raided each other, betrayed each other, and remained fractured while surrounded by powerful neighbors. China to the south, Islamic Khwarezm to the west. And various Turkic tribes in every direction, Temujin began building something no one else had dared to dream of: unity. He formed alliances, not through bloodlines, but through loyalty. He promoted people based on merit, not birth. In a world of aristocratic rule, this was revolutionary. Former slaves became generals. Loyal warriors became brothers. Slowly, tribe by tribe, Temujin began to unify the Mongols under one banner. In 1206, he was given the title Genghis Khan, universal ruler. But this was only the beginning. Genghis Khan turned his people into a war machine. His army was fast, disciplined, and terrifyingly efficient. Unlike the armies of Europe or the feudal lords of Asia, his warriors could ride for days without rest, survive on almost nothing, and carry orders across thousands of kilometers through a vast communication system of relay riders. They were, quite literally, unstoppable. His first major conquest was the Western Xia dynasty in northern China. It was a warning to his enemies. He wasn't coming for tribute, he was coming for power. Next came the mighty Jin dynasty. Despite their vast fortresses and millions of citizens, the Jin were systematically dismantled by Mongol strategy, sieges, psychological warfare, and betrayal from within. Genghis Khan didn't just fight, he'd learned. He captured engineers, scholars, siege experts, and used their knowledge to break the walls of empire after empire. But perhaps his most dramatic campaign came against the Khwarezmian Empire, wealthy Islamic state spanning much of modern day Iran, Turkmenistan, and Uzbekistan. When Genghis sent a diplomatic caravan to propose trade, the Shah arrogantly executed them. Genghis responded not with negotiation, but annihilation. In a campaign that would become legendary, the Mongols razed city after city. Bukhara, Samarkand, Nishapur, millions were killed. The Shah fled in disgrace, and the Khwarezmian Empire collapsed. It wasn't just conquest, it was a warning. Betrayal would not be forgiven. Mercy would not be assumed. And yet Genghis Khan wasn't just a warlord. He built one of the most progressive governing systems of his time. He created laws called the Yasa that applied to all, regardless of status. He banned kidnapping, theft, and blood feuds. He offered religious freedom across his empire. Jews, Muslims, Buddhists, and Christians were allowed to worship without persecution. He protected trade routes, revived the Silk Road, and built one of the world's first international postal systems. Under Genghis, goods and people moved freely from China to the Caspian Sea. It was a brutal empire, but also one of innovation, discipline, and surprising tolerance. By the time of his death in 1227, Genghis Khan had conquered more land than any man in history, and yet he asked to be buried in secret. His grave remains undiscovered to this day. It is said that those who escorted his body killed anyone who saw the procession. Then they were killed themselves. The secrecy was intentional. He wanted to disappear, but his legacy didn't, because he left behind something more powerful than monuments. He left behind a lineage. Genghis had many sons, but it wasn't just through direct inheritance that his bloodline spread. He married his daughters into the ruling houses of conquered lands, embedding his family within Persia, Central Asia, and even into distant regions of Russia and Eastern Europe. His empire eventually fractured, but his genes did not. Today, genetic studies suggest that 1 in 200 men alive, about 16 million people, Garia, Y chromosome that traces back to Genghis Khan, his DNA, it seems, didn't die with him. It multiplied. Grandson Kublai Khan would go on to become Emperor of China, founding the Yuan Dynasty. Marco Polo visited his court. He ruled a China filled with cultural fusion, Persian architects, Mongol military leaders, Buddhist scholars, but as generations passed, something changed. The empire fractured. The unity Genghis built was undone by ambition, greed, and regionalism. The Golden Horde broke away in the northwest. Ilkhanate in Persia fell into civil war. Chagatai Khanate in Central Asia splintered into smaller states. The Yuan dynasty was overthrown by the Ming, and yet the bloodline persisted. Centuries later, another descendant emerged. His name was Babur, a prince in exile, a warrior of Central Asian descent. Babur traced his lineage back to both Genghis Khan and Timur. He invaded India and founded the Mughal Empire, one of the most sophisticated, powerful, and artistic empires in history. Under the Mughals, descendants of Genghis Khan ruled over hundreds of millions. They built the Taj Mahal. They blended Persian, Indian, and Mongol cultures into a single civilizational force. For centuries, they stood at the center of global trade, science, and diplomacy. But once again, they were erased. As European colonial powers rose, they dismantled native empires to make room for their own. The British exiled the last Mughal emperor in 1857. His sons were executed. His palace looted. His empire dissolved into the maps of British India. The bloodline was now hidden, and yet it lived on. Descendants fled into Persia, into Turkey, into Central Asia. Some became commoners. Others were absorbed into noble families, changing their names, hiding their ancestry to survive. Few even made their way into Europe, where whispers of Mongol lineage passed quietly through aristocratic circles. Why the silence? Because Genghis Khan is more than a historical figure. He is a symbol of power, of unstoppable force. To be a descendant is to carry a legacy that could be weaponized. Monarchies and republics alike fear the idea of divine right, of inherited empire. And so, the narrative was changed. Genghis was painted only as a barbarian, a destroyer, a tyrant. His governance erased, his tolerance ignored, his system of merit forgotten. What remained was fear, and that fear made the story easier to bury. But stories buried in history have a way of surfacing today. People are beginning to rediscover their ancestry. DNA tests, oral traditions, regional histories. And as more descendants are identified, a strange truth emerges. The bloodline never died, it simply adapted. They no longer wear crowns. They don't command armies. But in classrooms, cities, towns, and governments around the world, the blood still flows. Imagine if the lineage had never fractured. Imagine a world where the Khanates remained united. A world where Mongol governance, trade, and infrastructure became the blueprint for the modern world. Where Genghis Khan's descendants ruled a multicultural empire from Moscow to Beijing, from Samarkand to Delhi. It's not fantasy. It was a very real possibility. The network was there. The blood was there. And the power was real. But history chose a different path. Or perhaps those in power forced it, because bloodlines remember, even when history forgets. If this story moved you, if you want more truths buried under centuries of silence, subscribe now. We're only just beginning to uncover the hidden dynasties, the secret heirs, the legacies that shaped our world without ever making it into our textbooks. What they tried to erase is what we were meant to remember.